this is the exact opposite of what we were talking about before with the fear of the unknown. This is the fear of the known. This is the fear of, I think you mentioned it in your last live, but collective trauma,
Mm-hmm.
of a community that is continually brutalized, continually profiled,
Yep.
continually, you know, told that they are something. They are criminal. They are not wanted. They are destined for prison, whatever it might be. This kind of fear that you're talking about is a fear of the known, right? It's not a fear of the unknown.
Yeah. But here's where I'm trying to go with this as well. Again, I have friends who own guns, and I have people who've talked about this recently with everything happening. And they've said it themselves. We're at work, right? And granted, now I work like 60 miles from the southern border. I work in a place where Border Patrol drives up and down the road all the time. I drive in a place where known smugglers come through. I work in a place where a person who works here was brutalized and left for dead by that, right? I never have this desire to also walk around with a gun because that's not part of my job, right? And hearing some of my coworkers talk about like, I feel naked because we work for the federal government. Guns are not allowed in federal buildings. If I'm inside in the office, I'm inside a federal building. Can't have a gun. Um, so already I can't have it at work, And it also is not a part of my job duty. So even if I had one, I wouldn't be allowed to carry with me when I'm at work. So I'd never carried one or a desire to, so I don't feel an issue with it. I have a coworker who does own guns, who does carry and stuff like that, you know? And they've said out loud, I feel naked. I feel like I'm looking around, I'm nervous. To me, I heard that and I understood. For your protection, for your safety, you carry that weapon. That makes sense. But my reaction to that, listening to it, is you're not free. If you have to carry something that carries a lot of weight to be able to use it against someone else to kill others, that is heavy, That's not an easy thing to do. And for you to not have it, you now have this fear, this feeling of being naked and vulnerable. You're not free.
Right.
You're not free. You don't have the freedom I have when I go for a walk. I'm like, this is nice. That's fear. Again, of the unknown, right? Of things that you know that could happen, but that are not really there. Versus when I walk in the room, even when I'm working with police officers, hand in hand for community events, hello, eyes, gun, eyes, how are you? My hands are always out. I'm never in my pockets. I don't turn my back to you really. If I do, my arm's out to the side or I'm grabbing something, like that perception, because that's known, it's right there.
Right.
And then too with the concept of, it makes me feel safe. You carrying that weapon makes me feel unsafe. You know?
Yeah. I
Is your safety more important than my safety? And if your answer is yes, then you are not part of this community because you're invalidating my feelings. You're invalidating my trauma. You're invalidating everything that I am for you to feel safe for something that doesn't exist in this moment. But what does exist in this moment is your weapon and your holster.
and
That's a
this
whole
is
different concept.
what you're talking about right now is something that, as I was growing up in my hometown, like, I'm from New York as well, not from where you're from. You're from the city. I am I am from about an hour north of the city. A lot of used to be a lot of farmland. It's a lot of white people up there. It's a whole different part of New York. A lot of people think New York is just a city, but it's not. That's it.
Pretty big.
Let me tell you what, it runs red up there. Like, it
Oh,
runs
yeah.
red anyway.
Oh, yeah.
So
I've been
this
there,
is
man. I've
not,
seen it.
yeah, this is the what your experience and what you experience when you see a police officer, when you see somebody with a gun. is not something I was aware of until I went to college and met,
No, you're
you,
breaking.
met Brian, met
Yeah, yeah.
Lysol, met all the people who have, you know, opened my eyes and influenced me into breaking out of the bubble that I was in. That
Hmm.
I took it for granted because I saw the world only through my eyes and through my family's eyes. I didn't see the world. I didn't bother to see the world through anybody else's eyes.
Hmm.
And now, like, when I see, when I used to see cops, I used to be fine with it. I was like, all right, like, oh, that's a cop. But now, when I see them, it's, I've taken on a new perspective. It's almost like I don't really have any reason to be fearful, but the simple fact of what I know and what I know that you've experienced and what other people have experienced, it there's a tightening in my chest when I see police now.
Hmm.
I don't
Yeah.
feel I actually don't feel safe when I see the police. And that's not because of my experience, but that's because of my friends' experience. Because
Yeah.
if they're able and willing to do that to somebody I love and somebody I know, then like what kind of a person are they? But it's all
Hmm.
about, you know, I went to the University of Albany for criminal justice. I wanted to be a cop. You remember that?
Yep.
Like, you know, as I started to learn about police culture, though, in particular internal affairs, and its let's say its faults. I'll just say that nicely. Um, the police policing the police.
Yeah.
Um, as I started to learn about that, it started to open my eyes even more into what is able to happen when you do not have accountability, which is what we were talking about before with guns. See,
Hmm.
a lot of this is all wrapped up. It seems it's all wrapped up into accountability. Can you
Yeah.
talk for a second about accountability in terms of, because we have the Derek Chauvin trial. Can you talk about
Mhm.
accountability in terms of the police?
Yeah. Um, I guess a future shout out. Next week we're gonna be talking about the George Floyd trial. So I'm gonna be deep diving into that big time. Um, so a lot of the stuff may be repeated. But the concept of like police and accountability is you work for me, right? I pay taxes, I pay your salary, you work for me. You work to protect me from bad things that can happen in this community. Now, you have the ultimate weapon to stop someone, which is a gun. And last I checked, it's not an AR-15. And they killed a lot of people with just a handgun. And then I think even in the argument I got into Facebook the other day, with the discussion, whatever, because I'm not angry about it, is the person said handguns kill more people than anything else, right? I'm like, okay, cool. How many at a time? Still sucks, not justifying it as such versus an AR-15, which you could throw like 30 rounds out and kill 16 people very quickly, right? Um, we have to be able to hold these stuff accountable. And there's trainings that officers go through to even hold certain types of weapons, to be carrying them. I know most times they walk around with a handgun already, but they do have assault rifles and shotguns and et cetera in their vehicles, right? But then when they're getting out for a traffic stop, they don't take those. Normally, you just take a flashlight and then assess from there. Um, it gets tricky when you start blindly letting these things happen. And they even said it in because the dude kept saying like, "Oh, if cops keep messing up, well, we can't defend ourselves." I'm like, "Well, they're trained and they mess up. We're not trained."
Right.
Like I'm an archery instructor. Aim is hard. Like, are you left eye dominant, right eye dominant? Like, how should you hold something? How do you hold it properly? People want to do the sideways thing. That's
Right.
not real.
Right.
So it's
What's your
like,
stance? Like, there's so many
what's your
different
stance?
things that go into it.
Recoil. Like, there's so many other things that go into just a weapon that the thing that led to that whole discussion thing that it's on Facebook is the stupid picture of shoot back. That's not a solution because people aren't being trained. You're not putting time and energy into that. You're not holding people liable. You're saying you can just go off and buy a gun and then poof, that's it, right? And even with police, they are heavily trained in shooting and marksmanship and all this stuff to consistently.
Yeah,
They
arguably
still
too
get wrong.
much.
Yeah, yeah, a little too much, that's for sure.
And not trained in other
Bang.
areas, but you
I
go
think
on.
something else. Bang, bang, okay, yeah, bang. Like you know what I mean? Like that's a game they play, but freaking finger banging each other. Nonetheless, um, they're held to such a standard, and even that standard is not high enough. So what gives you the thought that a civilian should be held to less than for the same weapons or even higher grade weapons? You know, who is responsible for this, right? Personally, I would love to see the manufacturers on trial. Why are you creating such a weapon? Oh, to kill people. Why at such high capacity? You know, like anything could kill someone, right? James, a pen can kill somebody. We saw in John Wick a pencil. You know what I mean? Like you don't need all this stuff to do that task. As hard, as harmful, and disgusting as it is, you don't need all that extra stuff. So, in the concept of like police and guns, is like you already are having all this training, and we're still finding statistically the misuse of it, right? And even the same concept, because I've talked to police. I have friends who are cops. I have one friend who is now a cop back in Yonkers now, and I'm very happy about that because he's out of New York City. But nonetheless, you're trained so much in guns, and you say it yourself. I never want to use it. And again, the best way to not use it, they do it in the UK. Don't have it. You know, have it in your car if you need it. Like you have tasers, you have all these other non-lethal weapons, right? And it's like everyone wants to be an action movie star. These things aren't real, you know? Not for the everyday human. We don't need all this heavy artillery and heavy arsenals for what? Who is invading your home? Like, oh, people coming from South America. You mean back to their homelands? Because remember, this all used to be Mexico, right? Um, or even like for opportunity. You can't walk around saying you're the best and people not going to come check it out. Like why do people go to Las Vegas? Because of all the stories, you know? I'd rather go to freaking Corpus Christi, Texas. It's a beautiful place. Selena's from there, you know? Why do we allow ourselves to be so infatuated with these weapons when all they do is kill people, you know? And if you need like a 30 round magazine to go hunting, you probably shouldn't go hunting because if you have to shoot it that many times, that's not good meat. You know? Like, let's be realistic with it.
Would you argue that some people use or see guns as a sort of status symbol or like a power sort of power symbol?
Absolutely. It's definitely a power symbol because like think about it. When you decide to open carry at a Walmart, what are you saying? You know what I mean? Like, why do you feel the need? Oh, because someone's gonna shoot me at Walmart. They sell guns at Walmart. Like,
Yeah.
why would you? Like you don't go into a gun shop expecting to get shot at. You go into a gun shop to buy a gun. You don't have a fear necessarily of being shot in a gun shop, or at least I've never heard of that. You know, and if you do, why are you going to a gun shop? Like even like for me, I grew up in like the Bronx and even in Yonkers. You've heard gunshots in certain neighborhoods, and you've heard things happen in certain neighborhoods. You don't go there, you know? Why would you go there? You know? So it's like you have this perception of fear associated with a place, but you need to be carrying something. And then now again, like you feel safe now because you're carrying this thing. You feel powerful, right? Because if you don't carry, you feel vulnerable. You feel weak. Why do you feel weak? Why don't you feel safe in your own communities? And to me, that's the issue I would like to dive down into as a solution, right? Because if you feel safe in your home, like I've seen it, because again, I worked in the Park Service now. I've lived now in Wyoming and in New Mexico and now in Arizona. Um, when I was in New Mexico, a lot of people don't lock their doors. Now I'm in Arizona, everyone locks their doors. Why? Because we're 60 miles south of the border, north of the border. New Mexico, where I live, is still pretty close to the border, maybe 100 miles. No one's locking their doors. No one's even locking their cars, right? Then you have people like in Virginia, or like even where you're from, like in upstate New York, how many people like lock their doors on the regular? Why? Because you feel safe. You feel okay in your home. You feel okay in your community, right? The door still comes with a lock, and people are choosing not to use it because they feel safe, right? You have a right to lock it, just as you have a right to own a gun, but you don't need to because you feel safe in your community. This desire to own a weapon, why do you feel so unsafe? Oh, because I don't know who lives in your community. Go say hi, you know? Oh, because the
Yeah.
gang members. Okay, cool. Why are they in a gang? Now let's tackle the social issues that lead to people in those gangs, right? Oh, because they're carrying around knives, so I have. Okay, cool. They have a knife. You have feet. You can run away. They gotta catch you to stab you. You know what I mean? And they throw it at you and they miss. Oh, now they got hands. Yeah, you got hands. You got feet. I'm not advocating violence. Let me stop right there. I'm just going down the tirade in that concept. But you become in this mindset of, do you feel safe where you are? And then we're seeing gun owners say no because they have to protect their life, their wife, their kids. Okay, from what? Identify what that threat is. We have systems in place, not perfect. Like the police, we'll talk about that more next week too.
Yeah.
That's not a perfect ideal either,
Yeah.
the way it currently is. We need reform to make things feel safer. Um, but why do you need these weapons? Why do you need these things? You know, like one of the most impactful things that happened in my young life was watching Friday, you know, and Pops is like saying, you have your hands, don't use it. And he had the gun, he had to point it at him, he was ready. And what he do? Drop the gun. And we fought it out. And it was settled. You know, he used the brick, he technically cheated. But nonetheless, no one died. You know? And he got knocked out. Anyway, point being, you don't, because once you do that, there's no coming back from that. You know? Tupac,
Yeah.
not Tupac, Biggie said that. I don't wish death upon nobody because ain't no coming back from that. Like these are influences that are happening in these communities where gun violence is running rampant, but we don't spotlight it as mass shootings. We spotlight the unknown, and the Joker pointed this out. You know, like we had an officer die today in the Capitol. It's
Yeah.
sad. It's hurtful. There's not going to be a gigantic memorial service or big reform on that. Possibly, who knows? But it's expected because of that profession. But if the same thing happened in Times Square, and it did, people were like freaking out when that person went wild and drove through Times Square, right?
Right.
Like, how did this happen? And now you go to Times Square, there's a bunch of barricades. Now there's all these areas where it's people only. Cars can't drive up and down the roads in Times Square as it used to because we've adapted. Now let's adapt these gun laws because we've had 4 mass shootings with AR-15s, or at least 2 of them with AR-15s for sure, in like the last 2 weeks.
Yeah. I like how you brought up like adaptability. So like it still kind of surprises me how we as humans are so cool. We can adapt to almost anything, almost any climate. Like